There is a God that almost everyone believes in, and he does not exist. He is endlessly patient with everything you have no intention of giving up. He agrees with all of your opinions. He wants conveniently the exact things you already wanted. He asks nothing of you that would cost you anything real, and he is always, quietly, on your side of every argument. Millions of people love this God, and they will go on loving him right up until the day they stand before the real one and realize, far too late, that the two were never the same, that they spent an entire life bowing to something they made up. Tonight is about the difference between those two gods, and it is about the price of trading the first one for the second, a cost so quiet and paid by so few that almost no one even knows it is there. Be honest with yourself for a moment, because this is where it starts to sting. Most of us have built, without ever admitting it, a God we can manage, a God small enough to fit into the leftover corners of a busy life, a God who blesses our plans instead of interrupting them, who comforts us without ever confronting us, who exists mostly to be useful when we need him and silent when we do not. We can sing about this God, post about him, consume an endless stream of content about him, and go entire years without once being genuinely undone by him. We know a great deal about God, and we quietly wonder, in the honest hours, why he still feels so far away. That distance is not an accident. It is the exact distance between knowing about God and actually knowing him, and closing it costs something almost no one is told about in advance. The man whose teaching carries this message spent his whole life sounding that one alarm. Tozer was a pastor, largely self-taught, who wrote with a burning concern that the church had shrunk God down into something safe, useful, and forgettable. He called people relentlessly away from a low and comfortable picture of God and back toward the vast, holy, living God who is actually there, and toward the pursuit of him that most believers never truly begin. This message was built on the teachings of Tozer, and our prayer for it is simple, that God would use these words to meet you, honestly, right where you are sitting tonight. Not to fill your head with more information about him, to make you hungry for him. And wherever you are hearing this from, a kitchen table in Houston, the end of a long shift in Phoenix, a quiet street in Leeds, a car parked outside your own house in Belfast, a farmhouse somewhere the nearest neighbor is a mile away. We are glad you stopped here. Put the noise down for half an hour. Let this be the moment something finally shifts. But before we go further, one honest word for the person who has wanted this for years and never known how to begin. If you have longed for a real, daily connection with God, not a Sunday feeling that fades by Monday, but something that actually holds up on an ordinary, exhausting Tuesday, and it keeps slipping through your fingers because you never quite know what to do with it, then look at the very first comment pinned right under this video and open it now. That is the War Room Manual. 30 days that take the vague longing to know God and turn it into something you actually build, one day at a time, with a simple daily plan, an audio guide to walk beside you, and a journal to keep you honest when no one is watching. It is the difference between wishing you were closer to God and finally having a path under your feet, a real, practical, day-by-day way to stop admiring God from a distance and start walking with him. Open it now before the noise of your life pulls you away again like it has 100 times before. Keep it ready, and then come back and hear the rest, because everything we are about to say will cost you something, and it will be worth more than anything you have ever bought.
There are two kinds of people who say they believe in God, and the gap between them is wider than the gap between faith and doubt. There is the person who knows about God, and there is the person who knows him. From the outside, the two can look exactly alike. They carry the same Bible, sing the same songs, use the same words, sit in the same room on the same morning. But one of them is describing a country he has only read about, and the other has actually walked its streets. One has collected facts about a person, the other has met him, and nothing in the entire Christian life matters more than which of those two you truly are, because it is entirely possible to spend 50 years as the first kind and never once suspect that you were not the second. You can be respected and sincere and certain and wrong about the one thing that matters most. Think for a moment about what it means to truly know a person, and not merely to know of them. You can memorize every fact about someone, where they were born, what they do for a living, every detail available on the public record, and still be a complete stranger to them. You have information, not relationship. You have never sat with them in silence, never been trusted with the things they do not tell the crowd, never been changed by the simple weight of their presence. And if that person passed you on the street tomorrow, they would not know you at all, because you never actually knew them. You knew the file. This is precisely and frighteningly how millions of people relate to God. They have gathered the facts. They can pass the test. They know his attributes the way you might know a famous stranger's biography, from a distance, second-hand, without ever having been in the room. But they have never sat with him in the quiet, never been undone in his presence, never let him come near enough to change a single thing. And on the day it matters most, the difference between knowing the file and knowing the person will turn out to be the only difference that ever counted. And here is how the tragedy usually begins. We do not set out to worship a false god. We set out, without noticing, to make the true one comfortable. There is a law at work in the human heart, and Tozer saw it clearly. We drift, always, toward remaking God in our own image. We take the living God, and we quietly sand off the edges that unsettle us. We keep the parts of him we like, and lose the parts that would cost us something. We assemble him out of our own preferences, our own culture, our own hurry, until the God we end up with looks suspiciously like a better version of ourselves, and agrees with everything we already believed before we ever opened the book. A God made in our image can never surprise us, never correct us, never call us up out of the small life we have settled for, because he is not actually there. He is an echo. And an echo, no matter how religious it sounds, cannot save anyone, because it has nothing to say that we did not say first. Here is what makes this so dangerous. The person who only knows about God almost always ends up with a God who is far too small. Not on purpose. No one wakes up one morning and decides to shrink the Almighty. It happens quietly, by 1,000 tiny accommodations, until the God we carry around in our heads is a manageable, predictable, mostly agreeable version of the real thing. And that mental picture matters more than we could possibly imagine, because in the end, we do not worship the God who is. We worship the God we think is there. Tozer built his entire life around one piercing sentence. What comes into our minds when we think about God is the most important thing about us. Sit with that. Not what we say about God in public, not the doctrine we would defend in an argument. What actually rises up in the mind, unbidden, in the unguarded moment when the word God simply crosses it. That picture is the truest thing about a person, because the soul drifts all its life quietly toward whatever it really believes God to be. A small God produces a small, bored, distant, joyless faith. And most of us, if we are honest, have been worshipping a God far smaller than the one who is really there. Look for a moment at the small gods we have settled for, because you may recognize one of them as your own. There is the vending machine God, who exists to dispense blessings when the right buttons are pressed, and who is quietly resented when the blessing does not come. There is the therapist God, whose entire job is to make us feel better about ourselves and never, ever to confront us. There is the mascot God, who conveniently hates all the people we hate and blesses everything our side already wanted to do. There is the sleeping God, technically believed in, filed away, useful at funerals and holidays, but functionally absent from every ordinary Tuesday of our lives. Each of these gods is comfortable, each of them is manageable, and each of them is a counterfeit, a shrunken idol wearing the name of God, and the reason we cling to them is not that we are wicked, but that they are safe. The real God is not safe. The real God cannot be used or managed or predicted or fit into a corner. And that is exactly the problem and exactly the point. Because we shrank God for a reason, even if we never once said the reason out loud. We shrank him because the real one is expensive. A God who is vast and holy and utterly free. A God who will not fit inside our plans or bend to our preferences. A God before whom the only honest response is to fall on your face, that God cannot be tucked into the margins of a comfortable life. He demands the center. He refuses to be a hobby or a safety net or an accessory to a life that is really about something else. So rather than pay that price, we perform a quiet little trade. We exchange the living God for a portable one. We keep the word God, but drain it of everything that would cost us anything, until what is left is a warm feeling, a moral backstop, a kind of divine assistant who appears when summoned and vanishes when not. It is the most respectable idolatry in the whole world, because from the outside it looks exactly like faith. It uses all the right words. It just never trembles. So here is the first hidden cost of truly knowing God, and it is the one no one warns you about in advance. It will cost you the God you invented. Before the real God can become real to you, the counterfeit has to die, and that death does not feel like a gift at first. It feels like loss. It feels like the ground shifting under your feet. Because the small God was comfortable. He never disturbed your sleep or challenged the way you were already living. He agreed with you about everything. And when the real God begins to come into focus, the very first thing he does is dismantle the safe little version you had grown so attached to. He will not share the throne with an idol, even when that idol is wearing his name, even when you built it in church, even when you built it out of Bible verses. And this is why so many people, standing right at the doorway of something real, feel the ground move and mistake it for losing their faith, when in fact it is the beginning of finding it. The dismantling is not God leaving you. It is God arriving and clearing the room so that he can finally fill it. And you have to understand what you are trading up to, or you will never be willing to let the small one go. The real God is holy. In a way, our word holy has almost stopped meaning. He is not simply a bigger version of us, kinder and stronger and further away. He is other. He is the uncreated fire behind every created thing, the one who has no beginning, who depends on nothing, who spoke galaxies into being and holds every atom in place by the word of his power, and who is nonetheless nearer to you right now than the air in your lungs. To catch even a glimpse of that God is to be simultaneously undone and healed, terrified and comforted, brought low and lifted up. It is the experience every honest soul in Scripture had when the veil slipped for even a second. They fell down as though dead, and then they rose up as though truly alive for the first time. That is the God the counterfeit is standing in front of. That is what your comfortable little arrangement is costing you, not a nicer feeling, him. And if the thought of a God that wholly fills you with more fear than hope, then hear the best news that has ever been spoken, because this is exactly where the real God is unlike every counterfeit and every distant idea. The vast, holy, unapproachable God did not stay far away. He came near. The one no human eye could bear to see took on a face and stepped into the middle of ordinary human life and let himself be touched and heard and known. Everything Tozer ever wrote about the pursuit of God was anchored right here, that the God we are seeking is not a cold abstraction to be solved, but a person who has already moved toward us, who wants to be known far more than we want to know him, who tore the veil from top to bottom by his own hand so that no one would ever again have to stand outside in the dark. The holiness that would have undone you and the nearness that would heal you meet in one person, and he is not reluctant and he is not hiding. This is the staggering center of the whole thing. The God who cost you everything is the very same God who already gave everything to make the knowing possible. You are not clawing your way toward a God who is trying to stay hidden. You are answering a God who has spent the whole of history trying to be found. The second cost is deeper and harder, and it is this: to truly know God, you have to stop using Him. Almost all of us come to God at first for what He can do. We want His blessing, His help, His comfort, His protection, the door He can open, the problem He can solve. And He is gracious, and He meets us there, and there is no shame in coming that way, because everyone does. But there is a wall you eventually reach, and the wall is this: God will not let you know Him while you are only using Him. Because a person you are using is not a person you are knowing. You cannot truly know anyone you have quietly reduced to a means to your own ends. And so at some point the entire pursuit has to change its direction. You have to begin to want Him more than you want His gifts. You have to come to the staggering, life-rearranging place where God Himself, not His blessings, not His benefits, not the things He can do for you, but God Himself, becomes the actual object of your hunger. That shift will cost you the whole self-centered arrangement you started with, and almost no one is willing to make it, which is exactly and tragically why almost no one truly knows Him. And do not make the mistake of thinking that more information is the same thing as more nearness, because it is one of the oldest traps there is. You can study God until you are able to defend every doctrine flawlessly and still be quietly starving. In fact, knowledge about God all by itself is one of the most effective hiding places from God that exists, because it feels so much like progress. You can mistake the growing stack of things you know for a growing relationship with the one you know them about, and the two can drift in opposite directions for years without your ever noticing. There are people who can argue theology for hours and have not honestly spoken to God in months. There are people who can correct everyone else's view of God and have almost no living sense of Him themselves. The facts are not the enemy, and truth about God matters more than words can say, but the facts were always meant to be a door and never the room. They were given to lead you into His presence, not to become a comfortable substitute for it. And the saddest thing a person can do with the true knowledge of God is to admire it, file it neatly away, and come to a full stop right in the doorway of the very thing it was built to open. And there is a third cost, quieter than the others, but every bit as real. Knowing God will cost you the surface of your life. It cannot be picked up in passing. It is not absorbed in a crowd or downloaded in a hurry or caught by consuming one more piece of content about it. The real knowledge of God is found only in pursuit, and pursuit means hunger and time, and the deliberate refusal to stay satisfied with the shallow version that everyone around you seems so content with. It means pressing in on the days it would be far easier to drift. It means seeking Him when you feel nothing, and when you are busy, and when the whole world is offering you something easier and louder and closer at hand. Tozer's great theme was exactly this: that God waits to be wanted, that He reveals Himself not to the merely curious, but to the truly hungry, and that the real tragedy of the modern believer is not that God is hiding, but that we have simply stopped seeking. The door is standing wide open, but you have to walk toward it and keep walking past the point where nearly everyone else stops. And I know the objection that rises up here, because it rises up in everyone who has ever tried. You say you did seek Him, and you felt nothing. You prayed into the silence, and the silence stayed silent. You reached for God, and your hand seemed to close on empty air, and you concluded that the deep knowledge of God must be for other people, more spiritual people, and you quietly stopped reaching. But listen carefully. The dryness you felt was not God's absence. It was the beginning of the pursuit itself, and almost everyone turns back at exactly that point, right before the ground gives way to water. God is not a vending machine that dispenses feelings on demand, and if he handed you the fullness of himself the first time you asked, casually, with half a heart, you would treasure it about as much as you treasure anything that costs you nothing. The seeking is not the toll you pay before the reward begins. The seeking is where he remakes the seeker. In the wanting, in the waiting, in the returning, when you felt nothing, something is being reshaped in you. A hunger is being deepened. A capacity is being carved out that can finally hold him when he comes. He is not far. He is drawing you further in. Do not read the dryness as a closed door. Read it as the corridor, and now you can begin to see why the cost is hidden. It is hidden first because no one advertises it. The small, comfortable God is easy to sell, and the pursuit of the real one is not, so the price tag quietly gets left off. But it is hidden for a second and stranger reason too. It is hidden because the people who have actually paid it do not look impressive. They are not louder or flashier or more obviously successful than anyone else. Very often they are quieter. The main thing you notice about a person who genuinely knows God is not power on display. It is that they have somehow lost their appetite for the things that still control everyone else. The noise that pulls at all of us has loosened its grip on them. They are strangely unhurried, strangely unafraid, strangely full, and you cannot quite locate the source, because the source is hidden in a person they have come to know in a place you cannot see. The cost is invisible. And so, for a long while, is the reward. But the reward, when it finally comes, changes absolutely everything. Because when a person actually begins to know God, God stops being an idea and becomes a presence. The distance closes. The one who felt theoretical becomes nearer than your own breath. Prayer stops being a monologue aimed at the ceiling and becomes a conversation with someone who is truly actually there. The Bible stops being a book about God and becomes a place where you meet him. Worship stops being a performance and becomes a response you could not hold back if you tried. Ordinary days begin to have a floor under them that was never there before, a quiet company that does not leave when the room empties. And slowly, the hunger that used to send you chasing 100 lesser things gets quietly satisfied at its source, so that the world begins to lose its desperate grip on you, not because you gritted your teeth and forced yourself to give things up, but because you finally tasted something better than all of them combined. This is the one thing the small God could never give, because he never had it to give, himself. And a soul that has once tasted the real God will never again be fully at peace with the counterfeit. Which brings us to the most sobering possibility in all of this, and I have to say it plainly, because love does not leave it unsaid. You can be busy for God and never know him. You can be moral and disciplined and doctrinally correct and active in every good work and still be, in the deepest place of you, a stranger to the very one you are working for. You can spend an entire lifetime accumulating true and accurate facts about God and die having never once met him. And notice who this actually happened to in the scriptures. It was not the obvious sinners, the ones everyone could point to. It was the religious. It was the sure. They had the right words and the regular attendance and the confident answers, and they mistook every last bit of it for the thing itself, and they were standing closest of all to God in the flesh and recognized him least. There is no tragedy on this earth quite like arriving at the very end of a Christian life, only to discover that you knew everything about God and never actually knew God. Do not let that be your story. It is far too possible and far too common, and it is happening quietly right now to sincere people who have no idea it is happening to them. You may be wondering honestly which of the two you are, and that wondering is itself a mercy, because the people in the very gravest danger are the ones who never wonder at all. So let a few quiet questions do their work in you. When did you last simply enjoy God? Not use him, not perform for him, not study him, but enjoy him the way you enjoy the presence of someone you truly love. When his name crosses your mind in an ordinary, unguarded moment, does anything actually stir? Or is it only a word among other words? Do you love God, or have you mostly come to love being right about him? There is no condemnation in these questions, only light. And light is the very first thing a hungry soul needs. And if the honest answers unsettle you, do not run from that feeling, because the unsettling is the door beginning to open. And here is what you most need to know before you walk through it. The fear of the cost is always heavier than the cost itself. Standing on the outside, the price of truly seeking God looks impossible, like it will take everything you have and leave you empty. But everyone who has ever actually paid it says the very same thing from the other side, that they gave up nothing but chains, that what felt at first like losing their life turned out to be the first time they ever found it, and that they cannot now understand why they waited so long, guarding a distance that was only ever costing them the one thing worth having. So here is the invitation, and it is worth more than anything you will ever be offered in this life. Pay the cost. Let the small God die. Stop using him and start seeking him. Refuse to settle for the shallow version that everyone around you has already made peace with. Begin tonight to actually pursue God himself. Not what he can do for you, but him. And do not wait until you feel ready or worthy or capable, because that day is never coming, and it was never the point. The real God is not standing at a distance, waiting for you to become impressive first. He is, by his own promise, a rewarder of those who diligently seek him, and the seeking itself is the beginning of the finding. You do not have to climb up to him. You only have to want him honestly, more than you want the comfortable distance. That is the whole price. It will cost you the God you could control, and in his place you will receive the God who is actually there, which is the only thing your soul was ever truly made for. And do not overcomplicate what to do next, because the enemy of your soul would love nothing more than to keep all of this vague, a beautiful feeling tonight that has quietly evaporated by morning. Knowing God is built the same way any deep knowledge of a person is built, a little faithfully, every single day. It begins with time you actually set apart, not the scraps at the end of the day, but a real appointment genuinely kept with the God you say you want. It begins with opening the book not to gather more facts, but to listen for a voice, reading slower, asking him to show you himself in the words, instead of just reading about him. It begins with honest prayer, out loud if you have to, telling him the plain truth about where you actually are and asking him simply to be known. And it begins with coming back tomorrow, when tonight felt like nothing at all, and the day after that, and the day after that, until the scattered drops slowly become a steady stream. None of this is complicated, but all of it is daily, and daily is precisely where almost everyone falls, not because the steps are hard, but because no one ever handed them a path to walk and a hand to hold while they learned to walk it. If that is you, that is exactly what we built the manual for. But with it or without it, hear this. Start tonight, start small, and whatever you do, do not stop. Because the truth underneath all of this is that the real God is not far, and he never wanted the distance in the first place. It was never him hiding from you. It was the small counterfeit standing in the way, and the busyness, and the fear of what the real one might cost, and the quiet suspicion that he might not be worth it. He is worth it. He is worth every illusion you will lose, and every comfort you will trade, and every hour you will spend seeking a face you cannot yet see. The people who have truly known him have said, with one voice across every century, that there is nothing on this earth remotely like it, and that they would give it all again for a single hour of the real thing. So tonight, let the counterfeit fall. Turn, honestly, toward the God who is actually there. Tell him you are finished with the version you invented and that you want to know him now, whatever it costs, and discover what the hungry have always discovered in the end, that the God who costs you everything is the only one who was ever able to give you everything in return.